When you're in an adoption home, the parents that are going to adopt you, if you're about to get adopted, they are supposed to have a very, very well checked background. And if anything weird comes up, or if any sort of situation comes up where it doesn't seem like they're able to take care of a human being, they will not give those parents the opportunity to adopt a kid. Now, there are some situations where the system kind of fails the adopted child because they do not check very properly on the parents that are about to adopt a child, and gives the child a horrible life. The kid is getting the opportunity to get a family. There are times where they're either abused verbally, physically, emotionally, in any type of way, and they suffer a lot. Like this one situation with this man named Beto. He is a man that was dropped off by his biological mother at an adoption home. The people that adopted him actually treated him like if it was his fault that they had to adopt because they couldn't have kids. The adopted father really did some horrible trauma on him, to the point where Beto later on goes back and murders him. And he lives such a horrible, crazy life, but he came out such a peaceful person. So we're going to talk about the story of Beto and how his whole life started with just an adoption, with being abandoned by his mother, which is how he kind of portrays it, and then later on murdering his adopted dad, and also getting into working for the government and stealing a lot of kids for sacrifice. So this is the story of Beto. Let's get into it.
Viewer and listener discretion is advised. This episode contains discussion of sensitive topics that may be distressing for some audiences. Please take care while listening, and if these topics are triggering for you, we encourage you to prioritize your well-being.
Welcome to Taste of Tea Podcast. I'm Teresa, and in this podcast, we talk about true crime. So if you're interested in true crime, please subscribe, like, comment, and if you want to watch more about true crime, please watch my previous episodes. Okay, so who is Beto, right? So Beto was born in Mexico. So in a very early age, how he kind of describes his life as a newborn, he was so-called abandoned, kind of what he portrays it to be, by his biological mother in a adoption home in Tlalpan. Sorry if I'd mispronounced that. Tlalpan? Yes. Yes, so he is left in that adoption home at a very early age. He says that it's like within the 15 days of being born. He ends up in this adoption home up until 5 years old. So when he turned 5 years old, or around 5 years old, he was adopted by a couple. Now this couple, at least the father, the adopted father, was a horrible human being, and what he got later on, I honestly think he deserved it. Sorry. That's very bad. But this is not the way he treated Beto from early on. Literally, he treated him like he wasn't a human being, like he wasn't a person or a thing that had a heart or feelings, or like he just seemed very cold-hearted. Beto only stayed with this couple for only 1 year. So from 5 years old to 6 years old. And the reason why is because while he was staying with them, because he decided to escape after that 1 year, the reason why he wanted to escape was because this is when his life really started really rough for him. I mean, he was already feeling like his life had started rough because he was in an adoption home. But now what he had to go through with this family literally was a cherry on top. So his upbringing from 5 years old on, in that 1 year that he was with that couple, the first day that they adopted him, They brought him to some sort of like I guess market, and they ended up buying pescuezos de pollo. So chicken neck, which I didn't know people eat that. I have never eaten that before. I looked it up and it's a thing, and I was like, wow. Would I eat that? I don't know. I mean, it's chicken, maybe. Okay, whatever. Let's move on. So, oh, and it's roasted. So, just to be clear, I didn't bring this up, but this whole thing that he's talking about, his whole story, is in an interview with a YouTuber, and I'll put her up here. He's talking about his story. She interviewed him, and he literally is talking about his whole life in this interview, in this video. So this is where I'm getting the information, just to be clear. Okay. But anyways, let's move on. So the way he kind of describes that very moment, he describes it as, oh, what a dumb kid that couldn't eat. Because what comes next is that he peels off the skin of the chicken. And I guess the adopted father, did not like this for whatever reason. I don't understand why, but he takes him and he takes Beto, the adopted father, takes Beto, beats him, and then chains him onto a tree with the dog. And he stays there for a while. And that's basically his whole life with them. Well, that 1 year with them. It would be beatings. It would be chained to the tree with the dog, and also getting sexually abused by this man. And there would be blood on the bed. Now, many times Beto would tell the mom or the wife of the man that he was sexually abusing him, but the wife would never believe him. The wife would not believe him, and it came to be because she was also very scared of him, because he would beat the wife as well. So the man would beat the wife as well as Beto. And so it seemed like the wife couldn't really stand up for Beto at all. So Beto really had to just take it. And he couldn't do anything about it. So that is so sad. The fact that he had the opportunity to get a family and then ends up with a family that did not treat him like their own child. Now, supposedly, whenever this man would beat Beto or do these sexual acts on Beto, he would say, well, you're not even my son. So that kind of comes up later on when Beto comes back for this man. But he says that because the wife weren't, the reason why they were adopting Beto and why they went to an adoption home was because the wife could not have kids. So I'm assuming the guy was very angry about that he wasn't able to have his own biological kids, which thank God, because if that man were to have other kids of his own, I don't know if he had other kids, but if he didn't, and he had other kids of his own, he does not deserve to be a dad, because of this situation. Like, you adopted a kid and that's how you treat him, and you want your own biological kids? No. That's why you didn't have biological kids, because God was like, no, you are not set to be a father. That's just it. But anyways, so yeah, so that's the whole situation with that couple. And Bethel was like, I am done. I'm escaping. I'm not living another year of this. So he ends up escaping. And the way he escaped, he was sent for food on September 15th and never returned. I hope that that's correct because there's a lot of I understand Spanish, but there's a lot of slang and terms that I didn't understand when he was talking. So I'm hoping that is what he said, that he escaped because he was sent for food on September 15th and never returned. Um, so I'm sorry if I butchered that, but that's what I got from the interview. So yeah, so he ended up escaping and he ended up finding a friend. So he runs into this friend and ends up taking him into a shelter. So this shelter is basically a bunch of homeless people, and this is a time where he kind of felt like he was living his life. And it was like kind of the best time that he's ever had. And he describes this moment throughout the whole interview that he wishes he would just go back to this time. And he lived there for a year as well, until he got out. And he doesn't regret it, but he wishes he could go back. He felt like he finally had a family. So he felt like everybody was, I guess, welcoming to him. But at the same time, they were basically, everybody was in their own lane. What he says is like, you are on your own, calling it perros de la calle. So he calls them like, I guess, him and the homeless people, dogs of the street. And he kind of references this a lot in the interview. He kind of talks about himself or describes himself as a dog. And yeah, so that's how he kind of describes the shelter and the people and the family that he had in the shelter. Like I said, this was the life that he felt at peace. This is when he was like, okay, I feel great here. Now, mind you, he is 6 years old at this time. So he is still a very, very young kid. And for him to have to be homeless at that age is so sad. And that's when I say that the system really failed this kid. So his life in the shelter, when he, or during the year that he lived there, he would get up super early and clean cars. And he was sent to, at times, sent to get marijuana, marijuana. And he and then he started to smoke. So that was his starting point of when he would smoke marijuana. Um, Mind you, he is 6 years old. Yeah, let's not forget that. Okay. He also states that they always had food because every time, the men will get the protein, the meat or whatever, and then the women would cook every day and he would eat with everybody. They would all eat together and it was like basically a whole family. So for him it was the best thing. And that was his life. That it was very peaceful. I mean, that's kind of how it should be. Where everybody is like getting along and he's not being treated like a horrible human being. The sad part is that he is still 6 years old at this very moment, and he's basically having to take care of himself because, like I said, they were all in their own lane, but they still got along. But he's 6 years old doing this on his own. So yeah, so he remembers that and he enjoyed it. The fact that, he would always come back to food and they would all eat together. And it was just this moment where he was just like, it felt at peace. And so then when he turned 7 years old, this is when he left. He left to La Merced, and this is like a neighborhood in Mexico. But he met his best friend there. Now, these best friends are way older than him, but he calls them his best friends. They're around the ages of 50 to 80 years old, and he considers them his best friends. So when he arrived to La Merced, he sits on a bench. In front was what he calls Escuadrón de la Muerte. Escuadrón de la Muerte. Yeah. So basically, what it means is a death group. That's kind of the translation in English, but it's just a death group. And back in the days, they existed. I believe the reason why they call it the death group is because they would kill anybody in their way. But they don't exist anymore from what he says, right? So they talk to him, they come up to him and they say, "So what about you, kid? Like, why are you in the streets? The streets have owners." And that's when he like obviously was very afraid. He's 7 years old. These people are approaching him, and these are the 50, 80-year olds, I'm assuming, because that's kind of what it made it seem like. Because after the situation, after they asked him that, they basically let him go and let him live, but he had to win that privilege, if that makes sense. He doesn't explain what he did, what he had to do to survive, but that was basically it. He was let go and he was let to live, and he ended up joining them. Let me give you a little bit more context of what this group is. So the groups would kill anyone that got in their way, making offerings, possibly rituals, and controlling parts of the streets. So obviously if they see a person in the street and they think that they're just like, lounging around, you can't do that. You either have to be working or doing something else or being with them or in the group. You cannot just be in the streets in that area, from what it sounds like. So, yeah. So that's why they say that the streets have owners. So, yeah, they didn't know who this kid was. So yeah, so like I said, they let him live and they moved on. The crazy part is that him at 7 years old, he joins this group and he describes it like as if he learned so much. And this was a moment where he started, his education kind of started. So they showed him how to read, count money, and they taught him that money is for two things. Money is for creating chaos and to have a good time. So he wanted to use money to have a good time. So he started gaining money. Now, the way he started earning money or getting money was by what he calls the Niño Dragón, which, like I said, these are terms, these are slangs that I was like describing or telling you that I don't know. But he kind of describes it in the interview. He says lanzaba fuego, which I still didn't know what that meant. So I kind of had to look it up. Now, from what I found, it seemed like he was a street performer or busker. Look, if I'm wrong, I apologize. Okay. I never heard of that. So I don't know if that's what it means. But yeah. But then he would also like so he says that. So he kind of describes that's what he was, Niño Dragón. And then he stated that he would go find cars with that had their windows open, and he would steal their purses or steal whatever there was in the car. and then he would sell them, or he would take the money, or whatever it is. And that's how he would gain his money. So at that time, he was 7 years old, and he went from there to then meeting a girl at 9 years old. Now he is 9 years old and he finds a girlfriend. So when he finds this girlfriend, I believe it's around the same area that he, was in with this, I guess, quote unquote gang, if you call it. This girl was older than him, he describes it. She also did not have a very good life. So supposedly from what he stated, he said that she was molested by her dad and her grandpa. So she also went through things that kids should not be going through. It's insane how common this is. But yeah, so he did state that she was older than him. He is 9 at this point, and she becomes his girlfriend. 3 to 4 months after they met, they get kidnapped. Now, the people that kidnap them. It's literally 10 guys that take them. Now, it's not just him and the girl. It's another guy that they take, or another kid that they take, and they take them to a bodega. They were there for a year, or at least Beto was there for a year and 3 months, so he states, right? Now, when they get kidnapped, as soon as they get there, they see other people, other kids, because it's not grown adults. No, these are all kids at the bodega, and they're having them work out. They're literally killing their mental state. And if they cannot keep up with the workouts, with whatever they told them to do, they will kill them off. And that's that. No question about it. And these are kids. Beto states that they did get mistreated a lot. So they would get beats. Like I said, work out. They would have them read. They would have them lay down like utensils and learn how to use them, which is weird because I'm like, okay, so they're teaching them good things, but they're treating them horribly. So I don't know. At this point, it's like, okay, why are they doing these to these kids? And he kind of states, like, I don't know. I don't know what what their intentions. Like, he was just like, they just did it. But they also like had them learn how to express themselves, is from what he states. But throughout this year and 3 months, Beto says that he never took a shower. He was never given the opportunity to take a shower. He doesn't describe how they fed them, but if he wasn't able to take a shower, imagine if they would even feed them. I don't know. I'm not sure, but he wasn't able to take a shower for a year and 3 months. And then throughout that time that he was there, throughout the time that, because like I said, they also took his girlfriend. His girlfriend at one point wasn't able to keep up with the exercises anymore. And they ended up killing her. So he never saw his girlfriend again. And yeah, so that's how basically it was. If you were not able to keep up, you were gonna get killed. And then they would throw their bodies into the Telalpan. I think that's how you say it. It's that city that I was talking about in the beginning. And they would just throw their bodies in there, and it would be like in the early morning when nobody was there. And that's what they would do to the bodies. After the year and 3 months, they ended up taking Beto and taking him a shower for the very first time, randomly. Beto was obviously confused. They shave his head, and they dress him like what he says, a panquesote, which is, when I looked it up, it means a pancake or a cupcake or, something like that. I guess so dressed up. So like, um, yeah, like a little like boy, like, I don't know, dressed up with maybe a bow or a tie or something. I don't know. This is just what my guesses are because he didn't really describe it. But that's what he calls himself. And then he was sent to a chamber of deputies to see a man named Rogelio. Now, when he was sent to this man, he was also given this yellow envelope to give to Rogelio. And Rogelio reads whatever is inside this envelope because Beto doesn't really know what's going on at this point. But when Rogelio reads whatever was in the envelope, he tells Beto, okay, show up at 8 p.m. And Beto shows up at 8 p.m. at this chamber of deputies, right? This is when he learned, after he was asked to do that, to show up at 8 p.m., this is when he learned that this man now owns him. Because now this man is going to tell him to do whatever he wants him to do. I don't know if you heard that, but that was my stomach. I'm hungry. It's early. But anyways, so he learns this, and this is when his criminal life started. So this is after, describing the very beginning of his life. We're going to get into his criminal life and all the things that he had to do and how he got to the point where he is at right now. But at 10 years old, keep that in mind. Do not forget that this child is still a child, okay? He is 10 years old. All the training that he was put into while he was when he was kidnapped, it was to work. It was to basically train you to work for the government, which Beto was now placed in. But basically not within the government, from the outside. So he basically was doing dirty work. He would kill whoever disturbed them, is what he says. Okay. So he was able to hang out with a lot of famous people while he was in this system, right? He was able to eat with a lot of famous people. He was able to eat with a lot of them. These famous people are from Mexico, obviously, and there's a lot of speculation of who these people are, of who the famous people that he was talking about, because he doesn't describe anybody. He only he only states that there was a woman that people know her story, but he obviously that's all he says. But there's a lot of speculations of who these people are, which I'm not going to state because I don't want to get myself into that. But you guys can do your own research. So basically, what he says these famous people would do, were satanic rituals. So he would say that there was a lot of satanic rituals, and it had to involve kids. They would do a lot of sacrifices, which, if you have, sorry to scream into the mic, but if you have watched my previous episodes and watched the Epstein file updated video, whatever, I do talk about how they would sacrifice babies, but they would, in that situation, they would eat fetuses. And a lot of kids were missing at that point. But it seems like in this situation, it could be the same. There is something involving kids and sacrifices and whatever it is in the higher ups, in famous rich people. They're doing something, and I don't know what it is, but there's some more evidence here that Beto describes, that they would sacrifice kids. So I'm not sure. Allegedly, let's say allegedly, let me put allegedly here. Okay. Don't sue me. Do not find me. Do not look for me. I'm not saying that. I'm only describing whatever is in these files of the Epstein files, and then this situation with the interview, because it's just crazy how many people have talked about these sacrifices of kids. I don't know what's going on there, but something is up. Okay? But let's continue. He was 10 years old when he ended up killing his first person. Now, this means that he ended up killing probably a few other people. It's not clear how many. He doesn't state that, but he does say at 10 years old, he did kill his first person. Now, I kind of stated this in the intro, but his first person was his adopted father. He goes back to see him because of all the years, that he, was escaped. And now he is 10 years old. He would never forget that trauma that he experienced as a child, as a 5-year-old kid, um, and being molested by this guy. Like, and having to deal with it for a whole year. And then the guy being like, well, you're not my son. Like, all this stuff. He was not able to live a life peacefully. And so he would never forget this man. And that's the first person he goes for when he is told to kill people. And now he has no fear. And he goes back and he went with his friends, so he says, and he ends up taking this man, Beto ends up taking this man out of his job. So the guy is like working, and he ends up taking this man out and he kills him. Now, I'll explain how this whole, process happened, or how he ended up murdering him. But the interviewer asks him after this, after he says that he ends up murdering the guy, the interviewer asks him if it cured something within him after he murdered him. And Beto says no. But he does say that now, now that I killed him, now he won't be able to do any damage to anybody else, which it's a good way to think about it. Um it's sad that somebody has to murder someone in order to do so, because the system is kind of failing, you know, Beto, and hopefully this man didn't do anything else to anybody else. But if he did, they're failing also those kids as well, or whoever, the wife as well. This man should have been in jail. This man should have been somewhere else, just not somewhere where he wouldn't be able to harm anybody else. But Beto decided to murder him. He thought that that was the only way to kind of not allow this man to do this to anybody else. So that's how he describes it. And he ended up leaving the wife live. So his adopted mother, live. He does state that this man that he ended up murdering, he was 48 years old. Um, the way he ends up murdering him is very gruesome and kind of not a very, and I'm laughing because it's like crazy. If you can hear my stomach, I'm sorry. But it's just crazy to hear that a 10-year-old kid did this to somebody and could do it to the extreme that he did it. But that just shows how much anger he had towards him. But he took this man into a neighborhood, and this man was still alive at that point. I don't know how he was able to capture him. I don't know how he was able to get him. I mean, he did say that he had his friends with him, so maybe his friends helped. Maybe they beat him up a little bit to kind of get him a little weak, and then brought him into this neighborhood, still alive. Beto took off his nails from his hands and his feet, and then ends up burning him alive. A 10-year-old. Beto does state that this man asks for forgiveness, and Beto did not accept it because he was like, no, like, you did this all to me, and not once did you think at that moment that it was not okay. Like, he's like, no, he did not accept it at that moment. And he enjoyed making this man suffer, like how he made Beto suffer. So Beto was like, I'm I was enjoying this the whole entire time. So I was like, cause like what he says is like, throughout me, pulling out his nails and burning him alive, um, all the memories came back into my head. He's like, all the times that he would molest me came back into my head. Um, I wouldn't say that this is okay to murder somebody, but it shows how much anger he had towards this man and how much he was failed. And so for him to have to do this at 10 years old and feel enjoyment out of it, he was not living a very great life at such a very young age. And to have so much anger towards somebody at that age, you shouldn't experience that at all. You should be just living your life as a child and not having to grow up so fast. But anyways, yeah, so he tortures him and he burns him. And he does say that remember how I did state that the man would say, well, you're not even my son, when he would molest him. Well, at that moment when Beto was torturing the man, he would say, well, you weren't even my father. So he kind of turned around and threw back at him. Yeah. It was so sad when he was explaining this, because I was like, oh my God, like, he literally did this at 10 years old. I just can't get that out of my head. At 10 years old. What was I doing at 10 years old? Jumping on a trampoline? Like, what the hell? But anyways, they found him. People ended up finding this man's body. I don't remember. I don't think he stated, because I didn't write it down, where he threw this man's body, where Beto threw this man's body. But people ended up finding his body, but nobody knew who it was. But he was like, but I'm going to tell you right now, that was me. That was me. I murdered him. So at 10 years old, after this whole moment, after he is now involved in the government and doing this dirty work, um, he receives his first salary of 200,000 pesos. Now, to him at that moment, it was a lot. It was a lot of money for him, because he's 10 years old. I mean, like, 200 pesos for him is a lot. He came from nothing. So the way he would receive this money, his job was to rob also kids. So he would rob children. He would steal children, and he would murder whoever got in the government's way, or if the government was like, "Oh, they're in my way, so you got to kill them off." So that's what he would do. Life changed for him throughout this point, because this is when he became, so he calls, I guess, wealthy. We'll get into it. The reason why he would have to steal these kids, and there were kids from like the streets. They were not kids that he would find in people's homes or whatever. No, these were kids that were already in the streets, already homeless, and which is sad that there's so many of them. But yeah, these were kids that were already homeless, and he would take them to different states and they would sacrifice them. So this is the whole sacrificing kids situation, you know. So that's what they would do, or that's what Beto would do. And in those moments, he felt like genuinely, he felt like he was saving the kids' lives, um, because they weren't gonna suffer like how he did. So the molestation, the um living on your own in the streets and all this stuff, at least they were going to be taken somewhere and their lives would no longer be in this suffering in this world, right? That's kind of how he described it. Now, he does state why the government only wanted kids and wanted him to take or to steal these kids was because nobody ever looked for them, because they didn't have an owner, is what he says. How he describes it is that the government thought, okay, with these kids, no one's going to look for them, no one's going to care, and we'll just sacrifice these kids and take these kids and do whatever we want with them. I'm not 100% sure if this is true. We're all going to say allegedly. But yeah, so that's what he would do with the kids. Now, moving on to how he would murder the people that the government felt like they were in their way. So they would go to Beto and be like, "Hey, can you murder this person?" It could be a colleague, it could be a partner, it could be somebody that they know. They'll just be like, "Hey, can you murder this person? I no longer want them around, or they're in my way, or whatever the case may be." And so he would go, Beto would go, kidnap them, steal their money, and then murder them. So that was the whole process. That was his job, that whole thing. So, like I said, his life changed from then on at 10 years old. 2 to 3 years later, after he murdered the adopted man, or no, the man that adopted him. Yeah, that adopted Beto. After he murdered him, 2 to 3 years later, he had bumped into the wife. He ends up taking her out to eat, so he says. And he buys her a house. Because at that time, he has a lot of money. Now, mind you, he's still a kid, 12 years old. How the hell did he buy her? How did he buy her a house? I mean, that shows that how much money he was getting. But at the same time, it's like, how was that? How was the process? What was, I mean, I know it was back in the days, but I'm like, it wasn't that early on. It was like maybe in the early 2000s. But it's like, I mean, okay, whatever. That's not important. But he buys her a house, right? And he says that the reason why he buys her this house, the reason why Beto buys her the house is so that she could die alone in this home, in the house that he bought for her, which is crazy. But then he also states that he had some sort of sentimental like feeling towards her. He kind of felt bad for her because she was also being treated horribly with this man, the man that molested him. And so he was like, okay, well, I kind of felt bad and I did it for that reason as well. So there was just multiple reasons. I think there was just a lot of feelings towards her that Beto had that was just very confusing for him. But yeah, that's what he said that he did for her. So before that, at 11 years old, before he had bought the house for the wife, at 11 years old, he ends up living in Polanco, which he ends up buying his own apartment. At 11 years old, he ends up getting his own apartment because of supposedly his boss, which so he calls his friend. And the reason he calls him his friend is because he kind of treated him like a friend, but still had him do like horrible things, but still treated him like a friend. So he calls him his friend, right? His boss. Helped him get an apartment at 11 years old, which is crazy. 11 years old. I'm 27. I don't have an apartment. Different times, different times. I'm telling you, different times. But anyways, so this is when he learned that money is literally not everything. And he, like I said before, he wanted to go back to living in the streets, to living in that shelter with that what he called family, living with that family that he where he felt at peace is what I'm trying to say. And he would live day to day and in that shelter. And what he just and how he describes it and how he lived in that shelter, he would live day to day. It wouldn't cause harm to people because he started realizing at that age, at 11 years old, that he was causing a lot of harm to these kids and a lot of harm to other people. And so um he said that money transformed him into a very bad person. And he realized that, I believe he either realized that now or I'm not sure if he realized at that moment because he was still doing what he was doing up until he was 17 years old. But um, he does state that he did that money transformed him into a very bad person. From 11 to 17 years old, it was basically his prime. This was his prime moment. This was also during the time, this was also in that time, 11 to 17 is when he bought that house for the wife. But he said that he could buy whatever he wanted. He changed cars. Cars. Okay, he had a car at 11 to 17 years old that he bought on his own. Anyways, he changed cars twice a year. He had a lot of money and he would go anywhere he wanted at any time. He had no limits whatsoever. So at that moment, he felt like he was a badass. Like he was in his prime. Like I said, he really enjoyed this very moment because I mean, coming from nowhere, coming from nothing to now having everything and buying whatever you wanted and doing whatever you wanted. Like this was the life for him. This was his he was feeling like finally his life has started. Despite the prime that he was in, despite the enjoyment that he had, he still was in a way very humble. He was a bad person what he did, he states, but he was still kind of humble because he would send food to the shelters where he used to live. And yeah, he would send food to them, which is crazy. I mean, like you're in this prime. I mean, for me, it would be expected to not think about those people anymore because you're in a place where I mean, not that I would do that, but I'm just saying like usually people that come from nothing and they get something psychologically, they don't think about anybody else. Like they are very self-centered. Not all the time, but this is just what I've heard or seen. And they're very self-centered and they think that they are the shit and they think that they're better than everybody else or whatever. But no, he thought about those people and he was like, that was my family and I'm going to always send them food and send them whatever. So that's what he did. Every single time he would send them food. I don't know if it's every day or whatever, but he would do that. So he says, when he turns 18, that's when the government was going to kick him out because they wanted somebody that was a minor and not someone that was an adult because that way that, I guess it's a little bit more, and you can keep it a more like a secretive, whatever. But As soon as he turns 18, the government was going to let him go. They were going to kick him out. Months before he was going to turn 18. So he was still 17 at this time. Before they were going to kick him out, someone had told Beto that, or someone asked Beto to kill off his boss, which is Rogelio, which was who he called his friend. And someone told him to kill him off, that they no longer needed him and that he was in the way and that he was just not worth it anymore. After 7 years of working for him, he decided to let Rogelio know, hey, they trying to kill you. And so you need to look out for whoever is coming towards you or whatever situation that you're in, because they are going to kill you. And Rogelio did not believe him. He's like, you're crazy, you're a crazy kid, whatever. And so he let him know. Beto let Rogelio know, and he leaves. And I don't think he ever sees Rogelio ever again. I don't know what happened to him. Beto doesn't describe anything, doesn't state what happened, but he just says that he leaves. And that was that. 1 month before turning 18 years old, they arrest Beto for a kidnapping. And he ends up getting arrested in 2008, right? This kidnapping happened in 2005. And it was of a daughter of a local government official. So he gets arrested for this kidnapping. So now he's in prison. He is sent to prison at 1 month before turning 18 years old, which is crazy because this kidnapping was very, very, I guess, important to the government, to the officials or whatever. I'm not sure. But they end up sending him to prison. And this is the moment when I guess he started realizing that he never had peace after knowing what he did. He never found peace for the kidnappings, for all the kidnappings that he did. Because, I mean, he was taking kids. And at the moment, he thought that he was saving their lives. But afterwards, he's like, no, this is what I was doing was horrible. And so, so he gets sentenced. So when he gets taken to prison, he gets sentenced 72 years and 6 months. And he's still serving that sentence. So he gets sentenced 72 years and 6 months and he does not have any interest of leaving. He does not care to get out. He is fine where he's at. One, because he has a shelter, he has food, he has a moment to his own, and he is not doing any harm to anybody else. And this is how he kind of describes why he doesn't want to leave. He is at this very moment 36 years old, and he doesn't have anybody, no family, nothing. And he'd just rather just stay in prison like that, alone. He feels like he has been traumatized a lot because of everything that he had to go through. And he doesn't want to hurt more people if he is let out. So he's like, I'm traumatized. I know that if I'm traumatized, I could possibly hurt others because of my trauma. So he's like, I'd rather just stay in here and not hurt anyone. Which is crazy to kind of realize that you're traumatized. Like, for somebody that has gone through so much, realizing that you've gone through so much and realizing that your trauma can harm other people, is crazy. It's crazy that he understands that. But yes. So he does describe how this trauma is for him and what the trauma is, like what's going through in his mind. So first off, his trauma came off from the very beginning. His not knowing who his biological mother is, and he doesn't care to know. He doesn't want to know. But he's like, that's where my trauma started. Being left by my biological mother in an adopted home. The way that he found out that his mother threw him at this adopted home, which he kind of calls her la culera, which is very kind of a bad way to describe your biological mother, but I mean for him he has so much anger towards her. He does not care for her at all and doesn't ever want to know who she is. Um but he says that the way he found out that she threw him in this adoption home was because of a letter that was given to him when he was adopted by the couple in the very beginning when he was 5 years old. And so he says that that letter said that supposedly she couldn't take care of him. That's why she left him in that adoption home. And he's like, it's basically like BS. He's like, I understand, that maybe you couldn't take care of me, but I think that if we just only had a can of beans, we would have survived because of how he lived his life up until he was 17, or I guess 10 years old, because from then on he had money. But up until he was 10 years old, he at times didn't know if he could eat, didn't know if he could survive, or everything that he went through. For him, it was a lot worse than not being able to, than being with his mother, his biological mother, and not knowing if she can take care of him. I think he felt like he would have been better off in that situation than where he ended up in. And so he was like, I hated that was the excuse. He did not like that was the excuse, which is so sad. Because there are a lot of situations where mothers are like, I can't take care of my child, so I rather take them to an adoption home, which is up to whoever, whatever they want to do. If they don't feel like they can do it, you have the ability to do so, to turn them into an adoption home. But what sucks is that adoption home, the system does not fails the kids and doesn't give them a good life, because Beto had to live that life. Maybe if his life was better, maybe if the couple would have adopted him, that was a lot better and that would give him a better life, maybe he wouldn't have so much hate. Maybe he would have had a little bit, because it's like, who wants to be told that your mother abandoned you and threw you into an adoption home, which is, I'm only saying this because this is how he kind of describes it, but threw you into adoption home and you never get to know who she is, and she just lets you be, but this couple, decides to adopt you. So it's like, maybe if he had a better life with the couple, maybe things would have been a little bit different. He wouldn't have so much hate, and the system very much failed him. But yeah, so that's how he kind of describes that's kind of how he describes his biological mother and how he feels towards her. Now, the interviewer kind of asks him, like, what are your dreams? Like, if your biological mother never would have left you at that adoption home, what would have been your dreams? What would you have done with your life? And he says that he always wanted to be a pilot. He always wanted to fly. But then he says, the flying is just in my head. It's just in my head. That's the trip that I take every time in my mind. And so he says that if someone had offered him a soup at a very young age, he wouldn't be where he was at. Maybe he would be better off. But I think it was what really traumatized him and put him in a state where it felt like nobody cared about him. Like he wasn't important. And so when he felt important was the time when he worked with the government. And that's what he says. And so if it at a very young age, if somebody made him feel important, if somebody would have handed him a cup of soup or a bowl of soup, he could have been a different person. He could have been in a different situation. And maybe his life would have been different. He says, if your destiny is already written and your story is already told, to just enjoy it. He also says that if he lives tomorrow, then that's good. But if he doesn't, then oh well. Like, it is what it is. He's kind of living his life day to day, and he's just enjoying it, at least every day. And like you said, like I said, he just doesn't care if he were to live tomorrow. But if he does, then that's good. He's not afraid of death at all. And he also says that he reads the Bible a lot in prison. The interviewer kind of brings that up. It's like she asks him, "Do you believe in God? Do you believe in him?" And he's like, "I don't believe in God. No, I don't believe, sorry." He says, "I don't believe in Jesus, but I believe in the creator, which is God." And so he says that he thinks that the reason that God created him was because maybe he has something to do here on this earth, but he has no idea what it is. He does state that the reason why he thinks that he does have a purpose on this earth is because there was a time where he tried to commit suicide and he couldn't. He could not. It was impossible. He said that he tried to tie um a rope around his neck and hang himself, but the rope snapped. He couldn't do it. And that's when he was just like, okay, well, I guess I have to be on this earth for whatever reason. He says, so maybe he has to pay for everything that he did. He doesn't know. Or maybe there's just something else. He is a very peaceful person, which is crazy with everything that he went through. And he says it's okay. Like, maybe in his next life, he will live a better one. And if not, then he will repeat it again. It's all good. That's how he kind of ends the interview, which, to have that type of mindset after everything that you went through, sometimes people, if they've gone through so much trauma, they kind of have so much hatred towards everything and anyone. But this man, Beto, he is just like, it's whatever. I mean, I went through what I went through, and yeah, it was horrible, but I got through it. And I'm alive still. I'm good. Yeah, I'm in prison, but I got through it. And that is what it is. And if in my next life I live a better life, then that's amazing. But if I don't and I have to repeat the same thing over and over again, then it's okay. It's all gonna be good. Which is crazy because I don't even have that mindset, and my life is, compared to his, I'm very privileged. And it makes me tear up because I'm like, I feel like I tear up every single episode, but it makes me tear up because I'm like, dang, me having such a beautiful life. I don't struggle. I have everything I want. I have a roof over my head. I have clothes on my back. I have food every day. I get to do my podcast. I get to work with my significant other in his business with him and live a beautiful life with my family, with my sisters, with my friends, with everybody. And this man has nobody, and he still like thinks like that. It's crazy because I need to think like that. Like, we all need to think like that and compare ourselves to people like him, like Beto, that didn't have anybody. He doesn't have anyone and doesn't have anything to his name and is in prison and still thinks like, okay, maybe in the next life I'll have a better life. But if not, it's okay. And I'm going to be okay. And I'm fine. That's how we should think. Let me end this episode before I start like bawling. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Um, please subscribe and like and comment your thoughts on this story. It's a crazy one. It's a lot. It's a lot of information. But I hope you guys, enjoyed Beto's story. Well, not that it was like an enjoyment, but I hope you guys understand his story and could possibly like realize that a lot of people or a lot of kids, the system, the adoption system really fails them at times. And maybe it's not all the time, but Beto was a victim of a failed system, and he was not able to live a beautiful, wonderful life with a perfect, well, not everybody's perfect, but nobody's perfect, but a good family. And he had to suffer all for a very long time, up until he was 17 years old or 18 years old. And he is now in prison. He's going to be living there for the rest of his life. So please take care. Please take care of yourself. And I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode. Okay. Bye.